focus, the Premier League lineup for next season's confirmed after Leeds fell apart again. We'll discuss the potential fire sale at Ellen Road and how Forest might benefit. We'll also reflect on our interview with Tom Cartledge, discuss Callum Hudson-Odoi's future, and look at if Steve Cooper is set for a return to the Premier League with Leicester of all teams. Joining me to discuss all that, first of all, is Mikey Clarke, if he's finished his mouthful of crisps. Mikey, how you doing?
I'm all right, thank you. Sorry, everybody, I'm just scoffing down my lunch. Yeah, I'm great, mate. How are you?
Good to have you with us. And second guest is Michael Temple. Temps, how you doing?
Yeah, good, mate. The joys of half term. So I'm in a lay-by on the way back from Jump Giants en route to Peterborough Express. But if you want to be Father of the Year, these are the things you've got to do.
Yeah, indeed. You're doing a good job. Where shall we start? Let's start with you, Temps. You had a heavy weekend, I think, but I think you've seen the Tom Cartledge interview by now. What were your takeaways from it? It wasn't revelatory in any sense. I didn't expect it to be, but what do you think we learned about the man and maybe some of the wider intentions of the football club?
He's got him with his eyes wide open because, as he said himself, he knew the ownership and the club for many years before he took formal office. So in a sense, he did know what he was letting himself in for. And I enjoyed the question about his enjoyment of the games. And it sounded like Mrs. Cartledge had asked him the same thing, given how invested he is. I can see he cares. He definitely wants the club to succeed. But the biggest takeaway for me was you go into any new role convincing yourself you can be transformational and change the world in your lunch break and all the rest of it and have all these ideas, and then reality takes over. And the day-to-day business of operating a business as complex as a Premier League football club takes away a lot of your time. So all the things that he wants to achieve and the things that we know are on his to-do list that he eloquently outlined to you will take far longer than we think. And I think that was the biggest takeaway for me. The task of transforming the infrastructure behind Forest into a Premier League club has barely even started. There's a lot to do. The steps are obvious. His priorities are our priorities. But what he and us think is going to take 2 years is probably going to take 5 to 10. But I could see that he cared, and that landed with me. But yeah, his to-do list is getting bigger and bigger every day just to get through the 9 to 5 before he even starts laying bricks.
I read all the comments, Mikey. I don't think we've had so many comments in an interview, but I read them all on YouTube and Twitter. So thanks for everyone who dropped one on. If you're doing a bit of a word cloud, I think politician, trust, and a general sentiment of actions speak louder than words, I guess, is what people were saying. So is that what we have to judge it by now, is what actually happens more as much as what Tom said?
I think so. So I read all the comments too. I deliberately went out my way just to see the feedback, and I watched it. When did I watch it? I think it was maybe the day after it dropped, and I've listened to it as well just to try and understand some of his answers. I think, just before I give you my view, I think what I really enjoyed was, in the last few weeks we've had on this podcast Henry Winter, Harry Toffolo, the chairman. The level of trust I think that we've got with certain people, I think plays into it quite well, and I think it's a testament to you, Matt, that these people are coming on and talking openly and candidly, and not shirking the vast majority of your questions. So that's one thing I wanted to say. So well done, mate. I think the questions you asked were pertinent. I think I wrote down 10 or 12, didn't I, when we were talking prior around what we think we should ask. I think you asked them all. I think he answered the vast majority. I concur with Temps. I think it's probably dawned on him now, the job he's got, the big job he's got. Transformation is a great word. I think there's a lot to do at the football club, and I think he's now got his eyes wide open if he didn't have before. There are one or two bits which I'm still a little bit worried about. So I think you asked him a question on PSR and whether you want to call it now, whether he thinks we might be a little bit stuck again this season. He very cleverly navigated around that. Didn't necessarily give an upfront answer. And there's one or two other bits as well, which suggests to me that it's very much in the forefront of his mind and his mindset to make sure that we don't fall foul of those rules again this season. We spoke about the stadium, a few other bits as well. So I thought it was quite revealing, but He's a politician, right? He is very slick. I don't think you get to a level where he's at without being able to sit in front of people and answer the questions the way he did. So nothing surprised me in terms of what he said. I think I'm really glad he came on, because I think he was quite open with some of his answers, maybe not with some of his other ones, but I think it's a start. And, I've been wanting for ages to speak to people at the club around some of the things that are all concerning us around season ticket prices and all that sort of stuff, relocation, points deductions, all that sort of stuff. And to get him on here and for him to sit for 45, 50 minutes and to talk, I think was great. So well done, mate. I think there are a few things. I mean, I'd love to get more people on. Maybe we can ask him to come back on again. I don't know, Matt, but I'm really pleased, and it was a good 45 minutes well spent. And I did read all the comments as well, and I think everybody's opinion is pretty fair. I didn't read anything that suggested to me that his message had landed completely different than the way I took it. But nothing really surprised me. He's very, very slick. He's a very slick operator. I think that's fair to say. But yeah, well done, mate.
Good. Yeah, I think it went well from our point of view. I was a bit worried people would hate it, but the questions were fine. These chaps gave me a bit of a briefing beforehand just to soften him up and not go in 2-footed. So I listened to Uncle Temps, as I always do, and I think it came out well. People were expecting Frost Nixon, me to batter him down. Tom Cruise read Jack Nicklaus till he screamed, "You can't handle the truth about the City Ground," or something like that. That was never going to happen. But yeah, it went as well as I could, I think. Do you want to come in there, Temps? You unmuted yourself briefly.
I was going to say, don't do yourself down. I think it is intimidating speaking to someone who holds that kind of office, right? But Tom's an honest fella. I know him a little bit, and of course he has to give the politician's answer, and he has to think how things will land and what the boss is going to think when he hears it too. But he's an intelligent and articulate man, and I certainly trust him. If you're watching that and assessing his character, his ability to do the job, he's come out of reputation enhanced, I think, for sure. But just a trivial example, there's no water to wash your hands at half time. The club know that's like a 300 grand fix to dig up half the main stand car park, and it's that bit of detail that you get on the inside that you would never have when you're on the outside, and that's kind of the point that I was trying to make. He can't come on there and give you populist answers and make promises that he then can't fulfill. So as Mikey rightly said, it will be judged in the fullness of time, but there's some good people at the club. He's one of them. He's one of us too, Forest fan. And yeah, we will make progress under Tom's watch.
It was interesting as well, Temps, at the weekend. Sort of staying on the ground theme, obviously Take That were at the City Ground over the weekend. I don't know a figure of how much it raised, but I imagine the economic impact for the football club, surrounding businesses, was massive. And I saw a few people on Twitter saying, if we can do this at this weekend, it's another reason to stay. And I know it's not like as simple as that, but it does show the importance of Premier League football and what the City Ground can bring to the area economically, I guess, doesn't it? What happened this weekend? Yeah,
I mean, the area around the City Ground and Trent Bridge has blossomed off the back of the frequency and the attendance of the events that are staged. So yeah, a lot of businesses, a lot of jobs completely reliant on those matches being as high profile as they are. I think with Take That, the most important thing is we're now on the map. Concert promoters know it's viable to stage big music events in Nottingham at the City Ground. It hasn't happened for 25 years. And it's off the back of my own experience working at the Olympic Stadium. There's probably only 3 or 4 old promoters in the UK who are big enough to bring the acts to you that are going to command a sellout venue. So it's great for us. It puts a load of industry eyes on the City Ground for the first time in a slightly different light. And all of these things are designed to enhance our turnover, because the rules are changing. As Tom articulated, you can only spend a percentage of your turnover on player wages. I think it's 70%. So all these things that we do that don't hit the fans' pocket, the core Forest football season ticket holder in the pocket, can only be a good thing. So even if you're not to Take That fan, you should be behind the non-match day cash racing ventures that Forest are now into, because these kind of things weren't happening under previous ownership and they weren't happening in previous seasons. So didn't attend myself as I was in Hamburg on a stag do, but I'm assured that Forest delivered a very good event there, and they'll be on the map with promoters across the UK and the world.
A few of us attended. I didn't. I know Emily was there. I don't think Greg was there, but Mrs. Mitchell was. Mikey, you were there, weren't you? Any reviews to offer?
I was there. Yeah, absolutely. Me and Lindsay went. It was all right, It's not really my thing, but in terms of the show that the band put on was great. And Temps is right. There was over 50,000 people there for both nights. Like a total, I think 25, slightly more for the Sunday. But what Temps has touched upon, which I think is the real key thing, is everybody around the ground for those events benefited. The bars were full, the restaurants were full. The people that have maybe never come to the ground before might think about coming to the ground again because of the event that Nottingham put on. And the hub, the buzz around on the Saturday was quite incredible, really. And I really enjoyed it, and they put on a good show. And to be honest, all the Forest lot were very helpful as well, from the stewards to the bar staff to everything else. I enjoyed the day, and it just shows you what this ground and this set of people are capable of. And it adds weight to me, if anything, that if we can do things like that there, then maybe we don't need to look at relocating. We just need to ramp up what's already there. Be it the stadium, be it the infrastructure, everything around it. It's a sporting hub, is Nottingham. Within a mile, you've got 2 or 3 football teams. You've got the ice hockey. You've got Trent Bridge. You've got a load of great bars and restaurants that can facilitate and cope with influx of people, be it for a gig or a football match. And the city was buzzing for 2 days, and quite rightly, it was great.
Mikey, you got your Heavy Rock t-shirt on there, but I'd respect you so much more if you're just honest with yourself and brought out your Gary Barlow merch.
It's in the other room, mate.
Let's stay with another fun event of the weekend. Leeds losing the playoff final to Southampton. So Southampton are back. I was quite pleased. I thought we could probably pick the bones out, or Premier League clubs would pick the bones out of each club a little bit. But Leeds, it sounds like they've got to sell a lot of players now. I saw Kieran Maguire say they owe 190 million in fees before they can even spend effectively. This is just a bit of fun, really. But when you look at their squad, Temps, any players that you like the look of that kind of fit what we're after or not?
I like Nonto. I liked what he did in the Premier League as well. I thought he was an outstanding prospect at that moment in time. Quick aside, so I'm on this stag in Hamburg with a Leeds fan, and we'd already booked a boat trip, which clashed with kickoff in the playoff final. So the vote went out to the boys in the group earlier in the week. Should we watch the playoff final or stick with the boat trip? And pleased to say we stuck with the boat trip. So he missed the misery of that. But it's good for Forest in a couple of senses. I don't think Southampton will put together quite the same squad that Leeds would have done had they come up. I think Leeds would have been the stronger competitors. And it demonstrates, too, the compounding effect of coming down, gambling and failing. So that £190 million transfer deficit that Leeds have to plug to stand still before they start trading, it's not all due immediately. It's due over 2 or 3 years. But their plan, their gamble, was to throw the house at last season, come back up straight away, probably with automatic promotion in mind. So that's a massive dent and a massive rebuilding job required to get Leeds United back in the Premier League and competitive. But on the flip of that, having had consecutive seasons in the Premier League, we're now circling around the likes of Leeds United, the likes of Luton, Burnley, Sheffield United, looking at their players, knowing that we're a far more attractive proposition as we prepare to go into our 3rd season in the Premier League. So, yeah, Nonto is probably the one that I was most excited about before. We're going to come on and talk about another winger in a sec. But if we keep both our wingers, is he going to get in ahead of them? Probably not when they're on form.
No, that's probably true. Before I throw it to Mikey as well, they got a load of players out on loan because they instead of putting relegation release clauses or relegation contract clauses, they put loan clauses in, which I've not heard of before. So obviously they got Jack Harrison, but I think he might go to Everton. Sinister has gone to Bournemouth. They got Rasmus Christensen, Mark Rocker, Maximilian Wober, and Robin Koch, and Brandon Aronson as well, the American attacking midfielder. They've all got to come back, so I don't know if they can shift those as well. They do have good players, Mikey. I mean, I think Somerville's been on Forest list for a while, and he won Championship Player of the Year. So he's one that would stand out for me. And then they've got Ampadu, and Archie Gray looks a massive prospect. I suspect that he'd be way out of our level, really. I think it would be the big clubs that would really go in for him. But like I say, this is really just for fun. But any Leeds players that take your interest?
Yeah, a couple. Well, firstly, I work in Leeds. Well, I work from home, but when I have to go into the office, it's in Leeds. And it's been strangely quiet in the last couple of days. Would you believe? A lot of people not turning up for meetings and very dour. So I'm not reveling in their lack of going up, but I think it amused me a little bit, if I'm being perfectly honest. So unlucky, but I'm sure they'll come again. But in terms of like some vultures circling around their side, I think if you speak Nonto again, as Tem said, yeah, very good player. I think Somerville Player of the Year. I think we were in for him, weren't we? I think at the start, but obviously we decided to go for other targets. He's certainly worth a look at. I think there'll be suitors for him. I think you might be right about Archie Gray. Every time I watch him play, he can play anywhere. Anywhere in the back four. He played full back. He plays central midfield. I think they played him behind the front man in the first leg of the playoffs. He's so versatile. He's 18. He's a brilliant player. He might be out of our reach, but he's a good player. So Gray and Somerville for me. But I think it just shows you, doesn't it, that just the difference between success and failure is just it's minuscule. One goal and it's so huge. So then you cast your mind back to 2 years ago when we beat Huddersfield in the playoffs. You look at Huddersfield now, League One, struggling. We talk about sliding doors moments. We talk about the minuscule differences between success and failure. And Leeds just couldn't get over the line. They got 90 points in the league. That gets you promoted 99 times out of 100. But this year has been so strange, and Ipswich and Leicester have really just battered that league that they just couldn't get over the line. And they might find themselves struggling a little bit next season, but that's just what happens in football. The difference between success and failure is so small. But I think there are one or two players in that Leeds squad. Be interesting to see what they do. But for me, it's Somerville. Every time I see him, he looks a good player. And the way we play, which is we defend pretty deep and then we hit explosive on the counter-attack with those two wingers. Can you rely on Alanga and Hudson-Odoi all season? Or are we going to keep both of them? Not sure. So I think if Somerville's available, he'd certainly be one I'm looking at. But yeah, it just shows you, doesn't it? And I enjoyed that playoff final. The first goal always wins it, doesn't it? And people notice this. You get the first goal in the playoff final, you're going to win. You can't go behind in that. And Wembley's not a place for losers.
No, certainly not. Certainly not. Somerville's the one, I think. But it'd be interesting to see which clubs go for him, because I think quite a few will, and whether we can swim in that shark tank or not. Obviously, we'll talk about outgoings, potential outgoings next. Just before that, word for the Trent Navigation. Obviously, our season's over, but the Euros are on the horizon. You can secure last few early bird tickets are available now. So make sure you get your entry for Nottingham's original fan zone. I'll drop the link in the episode description after the end of this from gigantic.com. But make sure you get VIP tickets if you can do as well for the Euros at the Nav. Right. Let's talk about potential outgoings. It's quite quiet, really. I don't know how much of this is agent talk, temps, but Callum Hudson-Odoi, Spurs linked first. Now, I think it's Villa, really, when people are saying a Champions League club in for him, and then one other unnamed Premier League club. Are you worried about this, or are you conversely even welcoming it if it means we keep some of our other players who are perhaps more essential, as good as Callum is?
No, I'm not welcoming that speculation, because he's a player we've underpaid for and he's over-delivered. And I think the mid-table clubs, if we can call them that, have realised that he's taken a bit of a risk coming to us. He's shone. He's scored a lot of solo goals that he's created for himself. And off the back of that, he's rightly attracting interest from elsewhere. I think Callum Hudson-Odoi's agent would welcome moving him this summer. I think he could feasibly put a deal together that would tempt him. And I think that a fit Callum Hudson-Odoi, who, remember, is still only 23, is rightly on the radar of clubs like Villa and Spurs. I don't think it's a deal that we come out on the right side of, because I don't think they're shortlisting him with a view to paying mad money. They probably see him as someone that Forest have signed for £3 million and they can nick for 10 to 20, which I think falls far short of anything we'd like to do. You just fear if there is a world in which we keep Gibbs White and Murillo and it requires the sale of some fringe players, then you have to entertain a decision like that. If there's, let's say, for argument's sake, 17.5 million quid on the table for Callum Hudson-Odoi, we value him more in today's market. But if that deal is defence against selling the crown jewels, it has to be duly considered. But I hope we start next season with Callum Hudson-Odoi in the side. But I understand why the interest is coming from elsewhere. I think it's an outstanding year. And if he was to consistently play 30, 35 games, you could see how he could easily be a 15 goal and assist man quite regularly. When he's been fit and firing and had plenty of the ball, he's been very consistent. He scored the same goal 7 or 8 times. There's nothing you can do about it. He's a weapon, and we're a better side for having him in it.
Yeah, I think the fee would have to be pretty high for me to think about it. There's a few caveats, Mikey, as well, I guess. I don't know what the sell-on clause is, but if we got him for 3 million, I think if Chelsea got even the slightest bit about them, there'll be a pretty high sell-on clause in there of around 25% plus. And the other thing's just his injury record. I'm not tempting fate here, but every time he goes down and clutches his Achilles, I worry he's done for another year, which is kind of a potential reason to consider moving him on. But it would take a lot of money for me to welcome it, and it would have to guarantee Gibbs White or Murillo stay. Would kind of be where I'm at on it. What about you?
Yeah, I agree. The whispers are that it's actually more than 25%. So I go back to Temps's point. Nothing in terms of that deal makes me think that it's something that we'd look to do, unless it's silly money. And yes, is there a world where we keep our best players and sell our fringe players? I'm hopeful. Certainly my wife thinks we can do. We listed them all the other day. So potentially we can, but I just don't think it suits anybody at this point in time for Callum to move on. He has really stepped up to the mark those last few months. He's been brilliant, as Temp said, scores the same goal, but nobody can stop him. And if he carries on that into the next season, his value and his worth and his self-esteem and everything that goes with it is just going to rise. And maybe, as you look to the back end of the season, maybe there is a move to be had. But for me, I don't think it's one that we even look to entertain unless it's daft. And if the rumours of a high sell-on fee are, in fact, the truth, then it's certainly not what I'd look to do, because it just makes no sense for Forest. We spoke at the start of this podcast about the revenue that we would have got to take that, and in fact, it was great. And we need to look to commercialise more than what we do now to try and prop us up, basically, that we don't have to sell the players that we don't need to sell and we don't want to sell. And I just think that I could list you 10, 15 players now that we could have a debate about, and there were pros and cons about moving on, and I don't think he's one of them. If I'm being brutally honest, I just don't see a world where, unless stupid money comes in and rumours of this salon fee are just not true, I just don't think he's one that we entertain, Mark. Bluntly, that's my answer to that one. Don't think it's even on the agenda.
I think one benefit of it as well, Temps, is if you're a player who's looking for a move, you're a young player, maybe you need a bit of a kickstart. You look at Elanga, you look at Hudson-Odoi. Like, our football club's a really good place to send these young players, and really, like Murillo, obviously, to transform careers. And I think that is a good thing for us. Although I suppose the downside is eventually they're going to want a bigger move after us, I guess.
Yeah, and this is a shift in attitudes going back 3-4 years. I remember Dane Murphy talking on the record about shifting a policy away from signing mid-30s journeymen on big wedge for instant impact, brackets, Harry Arter, and moving towards signing players generally under the age of 26 on 3 to 4 year contracts who can be moved on if there's a buyer in the market, brackets Murillo potentially, brackets Mangala, given the stint that he had at Forest. So this is going to be the case. We're going to sell players that we don't necessarily want to sell, because you have to trade to stay in the Premier League. And if you find yourself an absolute worldie, then there'll come a point where they get shifted. We're not immune to Gibbs, White, Murillo, Callum Hudson-Odoi are probably our three most sought after players at the minute, being moved on almost regardless of if they want to or not. They're having a very short career, managed by all powerful global agencies, and these things can and will happen. The thing we should take some solace from is they're under contract. They're not walking away for free. They're on reasonably termed deals, and we haven't made a mistake. If Callum Hudson-Odoi had been injured all year and was languishing in the reserves, we'd be talking about him with the same level of disrespect we had for John Joe Shelby. He's no use to our football club. Get him off the books. So he's earned the right to be talked about through footballing performances and game-changing moments. But yeah, this is our reality. Even in a struggling side, 3 or 4 players have stood out, and they're the ones that are going to be sought after.
30 to 40 million for me, I think. Right, we'll move on. This is a slightly abbreviated, thrown together podcast, as people can maybe tell. But we've got a couple of other topics we'll rattle through. And good to have 400 people with us for an abbreviated, thrown together podcast on a Tuesday afternoon. One of the topics, just to briefly discuss, sort of staying on the theme of Premier League madness and movement, Mikey, Steve Cooper, beloved of this parish by almost everyone, potentially going to Leicester or Burnley. I think he's favourite for the Burnley job last I looked. And Leicester, Maresca's somehow getting the Chelsea job. I'll ask one other question about that. But Cooper potentially back in the Premier League. Would you welcome it if it's at Leicester of all clubs, or would he have gone down in our estimation if he goes there?
Oh, it's a tricky one. I was having this debate yesterday with my mate. We were out, and his view, James's view, is he cares not for Leicester and he's not bothered. So good luck to Steve Cooper. My view is, having lived in Leicester and had to suffer their fans, is that I wouldn't personally like that. You know, of all the clubs that potentially could come back into, please don't go to one of our rivals. But I don't begrudge him it. I think Cooper's stock is still really high. You know, he worked wonders at Forest. He got us up. He kept us up, and you know, we both moved on. There are some big jobs out there, you know. Like I was thinking the other day, you know, I don't know whether Sunderland have maybe filled their, well, that's a huge football club. You know, Burnley have just come down. They'll have parachute payments and maybe the basis of the squad that can push to go back up. Leicester just, I don't know, they confuse me a little bit, Leicester, because their centre back with the hair, is it Faz? I can't pronounce his name. Yeah. He really struggled. This is the gap, right? So he really struggled in the Premier League. He goes down to the Championship. He looks the best thing since sliced bread. He's like Rolls Royce. And that is the gap between the two. So they're arguably coming back up with a very similar squad that they got relegated with. They're not going to have a manager. There's a possible points deduction hanging over them. I'm not sure he'd want to go in there. I'm trying to convince him not to do it. I'm not sure he'd want to go. But I think it's a matter of time before he jumps back in. He's obviously had a break now. He's probably ready for a new challenge. I just hope it's not with Leicester, and I don't think it will be, because, like I said, there are many opportunities now, and that merry-go-round is starting, isn't it? And there are some big clubs, big projects. Sunderland again jumps to mind, that he could go into and be revolutionary and transformative, and exactly what he did at Forest, he could do for a club like that. I just don't think Leicester fits, and I hope it's not Leicester. His stock wouldn't lose for me. I mean, I will forever remember what he's done for this football club. I just don't want him to get to Leicester. Go somewhere else, mate, would be my suggestion.
Just on that Leicester thing briefly, I mean, obviously we're going to look higher up the table, Temps, but I had them even more nailed on to get relegated under Maresca, playing that style of football, getting absolutely mullered every week and being naive. Probably makes me think they're a little bit better. But just generally, any thoughts on the managerial merry-go-round in the Premier League and Cooper potentially going there or anywhere else before we move on?
Well, Steve Cooper hates the Leicester and he hates the Derby, doesn't he? And he quite enjoyed us singing about that for a couple of years. So let's hope that comes to fruition. I'll take Mikey out on the scale of the job. I think the Leicester job's a far bigger job than the Burnley job. You do a tour of those training facilities, you'd pretty quickly be convinced that that's a paddock that you'd like to work on. So I do think that Leicester could convince Steve Cooper that he's the man. Usually it's a fickle business and you're soon forgotten. Not the case with Steve Cooper. He'll go down in Forest folklore, to the point where I think he may even be forgiven if he turned up as the Leicester manager. But that's the kind of profile of club. Forget the name, where they are. That's the kind of profile club that I think Steve Cooper is going to go into next. He's not going to be given the keys to a mid-table Premier League side. He's going to take on someone that's on the up, or maybe do a rescue job on someone that's just been relegated from the Premier League. So if Burnley and Leicester are on the table, that's the kind of bracket that I think is his re-entry point to football. Does he care enough to turn it down? Probably not. He had no connection to Forest until he walks in through the door. I think it'll be hard for him to use the same tactics he did at Forest at Leicester without them being seen as, I don't know, a bit more of method than heartfelt. If he finds himself, engaging the ex-pros and punching the air in front of the stand and all the things that he did, it kind of feels like our thing. And I wonder how authentic it would look if he was to do it at Leicester. If he goes in at Burnley, yeah, good on him. And you know what? I rate any club that sees the good in Steve Cooper, how he gets young people, how he can immediately integrate loan players, how he can get you out of the Championship. Ultimately, yeah. So this is an appeal to the chairman of Burnley. Give him a job; he deserves it.
Very good. One last quick topic, Mikey, before we go on to any other business. Joe Worrell won the Turkish Cup, ends his loan spell. I think he played 9 games. Temps's kids are extraordinarily patient. That's why we're rattling along a bit here. But
just telling me what she thinks about the managerial merry-go-round. She says football's changed and she wants her game back.
Just quickly, Mikey, on Joe. I think I was discussing this. I can't remember what stream it was on. It might have been a member stream, so I don't think we're reiterating new old stuff here. If Joe comes back as 4th or 5th choice, is that good for us and potentially bad for him career-wise, do you think, or not?
No, I don't think so. I think we tweeted this morning, didn't he, thanking Besiktas and saying, great memories, with some great photos. I think if Nuno stays, I can see us going to a back 3, right? So if that's the case, you're going to need 5 or 6 centre-backs. And at the moment, we don't have that. So he could come back in and be 4th, 5th, 6th choice and quite realistically play a few games and see out the last year of his contract, or maybe get moved on. So I think where he may struggle is if we stick with the back 4 and then maybe recruit 1 or 2 at centre-back, he's just not going to get a look in. But I think he comes back. I think he has pre-season with us. And then I think based on what we're doing and what we're trying to do and what shape we're going to have and who's going to be the manager, it's then a conversation for everybody to sit down and say, right, does Joe Worrell feature this season? I'd like to have him around the place, because I think with him and Yatesy and a few others that, have worked their way through the club, they might not be the greatest players, but they offer so much in terms of leadership and everything else that you might not see on the pitch. And if he's just going to come in and be a bit part player, that's absolutely fine. I think that's my head. I think what my gut says is he'll come back and then he'll probably move on, if I'm honest. And good luck to him, because he's been a great servant for us.
Yeah, I think it was Calvin who said he thought he should go from a career point of view. I remember that, certainly. Right, just before we come on to any of the business, 465 people with us for quite a meandering show. So if you've enjoyed this, do us an even bigger favour and hit like on the video, become a channel member, subscribe, and give us some lovely reviews on iTunes. Temps, any other business from you before we go?
I'll just throw in my view on the Worrell thing. I think in Sheffield United, Leeds United and Burnley, you've got 3 possible, maybe even likely destinations for a player that you can get promoted with, you can stay in the Premier League with, but if Murillo turns up, is going to be eased out. But I think his attitude, as he's demonstrated by, leaving family and girlfriend in the UK and going to spend 6 months in Turkey, is that he wants to play regularly and not 20 minutes on the bench. He wants to start regularly. So I think he accepts that he needs a move, and now he's got to find the right one. And likely you're going to see him going on loan to anywhere in Europe for a bit part year at the age that he's at. I think he wants to get his future settled, and those are the 3 clubs that I think are probably the most likely destinations for him. I think he'll ingratiate himself. I think he's a potential, captaincy material at these sides. But yeah, I think he plays a full part in a really strong, successful Championship side next season, and it could easily be one of those three.
Very good. Mikey, anything from you before we depart?
Yeah, I think that's a fair summary, actually, Thames. I think I'm with you on that one. The only thing to add to me is just going back to what we spoke about at the start and Tom coming on, which, again, I thought was great. One of the things which I didn't mention is, we spoke about season ticket prices. And my friend has a season ticket at Man City, so arguably the best team in the world. And he pays 425 quid for his season ticket. Now, you can do comparisons and contrasting, and that obviously doesn't necessarily stack up with our prices. But the thing that gets me is what they do is every away allocation they get, so whether it's 1,100 at Bournemouth or your usual 3,000 somewhere else, they always raffle off 5% to people that are under 25, and they do a ballot. So we were talking about people that might now be struggling in those lower age brackets because the prices have rocketed up at Forest, and they might not be able to, the next generation might not be able to now afford to go and see Forest. My only appeal to the club is, even if they won't do a U-turn on this, there are little schemes like that they could potentially do. So like I said, Man City raffle 5% off, so that, they have 200, 300, 400 people, whatever their away allocation is, that are youngsters that maybe don't get to go and watch them, that can then get to go and watch them and maybe get the bug and then maybe add to the season ticket list. So there are little things that the club could potentially do, something like that, just to maybe flip it just a little bit, because I know there's still a lot of concern and there's still a lot of unhappy people that now can't afford to go. So just something like that, just my encouragement, just look at what some of the other clubs are doing. And this is the best club probably in the world, and they value it so much that that's what they do. And just my appeal to Forest is please, just look at doing something like that, even if you won't reverse the decision on youngsters tickets. And that's it for me.
But don't get to the point where you've got 115 charges against you to balance the books.
No, we don't want that. We don't want that. Right, just quickly from me, it's the anniversary of the 1980 European Cup win, so a shout out for that. Can't go by without mentioning that. Get your tickets for our live show on Thursday, June the 13th. If you haven't already, the link is in the description, and I might put it in the live chat as well. A few people mentioning Ruby's documentary in the comments. Check it out if you haven't already. I'm going to put it on our feed on YouTube and audio on Thursday, so you can check it out then if you haven't already. So well done to Ruby. And the last one, a very big shout out to Temps's daughter, who, having been there, it feels like a million years ago, but she is extraordinarily well behaved. Yeah, give her a wave, everyone. Well done, well done. You've done a great job. So you're the hero of this show. Right.
It's costing a Pizza Express the morning out with Jump Giants, but she's been good today.
No, she's a diamond, clearly, to sit like that. I don't think I could have got my kids to do that. So, yeah, well done. Well done to you. Right. Great to have everyone with us. Back tomorrow is the plan with something. Thursday, Ruby's show. And then Friday, we shall do something like this again for whatever is floating around the news for Forest. But, yeah, good to have everyone with us. 470 people. For a show of little consequence, but hopefully people have enjoyed it. Mikey, thank you very much.
Thank you very much. And yeah, please come to the live show, guys, because the last one was brilliant and this one's going to be great as well.
No doubt, no doubt. The Temple family, thank you very much.
See you, Matt. See you soon, boys.
Cheers, everyone. Right, like I say, we shall be back tomorrow. Have a good day, everyone. But in the meantime, we shall see you soon.